I definitely think there's a tendency with media, draft media, fans, as the draft process goes along, quarterbacks tend to rise up boards. It is due to positional need, lack of real talent at the position throughout the league, combination of factors. Also, part of it being is you don't want to be the team that misses out on a Patrick Mahomes. You don't want to be the team that misses out on a Russell Wilson. You don't want to be the team that misses out on that next big thing at the quarterback position. So it was interesting to me as the draft process played out for Dwayne Haskins. I was anticipating as things went along that his draft stock was really going to shoot up. Here was a guy that only had 1 year as a primary starter at Ohio State. And while, yes, playing under Urban Meyer, who's not exactly known for producing high level NFL starting quarterbacks, at the same token, he was incredibly productive in his 1 year as a starter. So you got a ton of upside. He's got size, arm strength, a lot of traits and characteristics that you like to see. But then as the process went along, you start hearing about Kyler Murray going number 1 overall, and that Daniel Jones is going to be a top 10 pick, and that Dwayne Haskins could be the quarterback that ends up seeing his draft stock fall in relation to where a lot of people had him. It actually ended up being Drew Lock that by far saw the most precipitous drop in his draft stock, but Dwayne Haskins nonetheless ended up dropping out of the top 10 compared to where a lot of people initially felt that he might end up going, and felt that maybe the Washington Redskins would have to trade up into the top 10 or even the top 5 to get him. He ultimately fell to the Redskins with the 15th overall pick. I always find it's an interesting dichotomy of you have fans and draft media that will push prospects up the board, specifically at the quarterback position, and then the league views them in an entirely different way. And ultimately it comes down to who's going to be right. Were the fans and media and draft folks correct? Or were the scouts and front offices and GMs and team executives correct that Dwayne Haskins wasn't the same level of prospect as a Kyler Murray or a Daniel Jones? And in this particular case, I actually lean a little more towards the fan, draft media type of perspective. I don't understand why Dwayne Haskins ended up being the 3rd quarterback taken in this draft. I really don't, because when you look at him, he's got decent size for the position, good frame, good build, and he makes a couple babies once he goes to the NFL. He's going to put even more man weight on, so he's going to get to the point where he's like borderline fat ass, like a Big Ben Roethlisberger, and a lot of people like that. Unless you're a woman that meets Big Ben in a bar or a hotel or somewhere like that, then you hope Dwayne Haskins doesn't get allegedly rapey like Big Ben. But you look at him, he's got plenty of arm strength. He can make all the required NFL throws with ease. He can put zip on the ball in short and intermediate places. He has easy velocity, easy arm strength to stretch the ball vertically down the field consistently. But when I look at him, it is about more than just size and arm strength, because let's face it, a lot of times you could get enamored with those things because of those physical things. Those are the God-given talents, the types of things that you just can't teach. And you would ideally love to have every quarterback have. But not every quarterback has it. And just because a quarterback has size and arm strength doesn't mean that they can play. Just because a quarterback may lack size and arm strength doesn't mean that they can't play. But there's more to Dwayne Haskins than just that. What really stands out to me about him are 2 things. And especially for a relatively inexperienced quarterback playing in the type of system that he did under Urban Meyer at Ohio State, the 2 things that really stood out to me were his field vision and his pocket presence. When you talk about field vision, Haskins, to me, out of the quarterbacks, the prominent big-name quarterbacks in this draft class, he was much better being able to consistently use his eyes to be able to go through his progressions and do it at a right cadence as compared to a Kyler Murray or a Daniel Jones or a Drew Lock. Now, sure, just like any young quarterback, and frankly a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, there could be those moments where they tend to lock onto their primary target, but you're talking about a guy in Haskins that showed the ability to look off the safety, a guy in Haskins that showed the ability to scope the entire field with his eyes and go through his progressions and come back if he needed to be able to bust off of his primary read quickly and go to his check down option. Really good, quick eyes, and not just that, but when you talk about the eyes, it doesn't matter if you can see if you can't react. And it goes a little bit into decision making, but when you talk about him, he can see it, and in some cases, he can anticipate it. He also showed what I really liked about him at Ohio State is you saw the ability to make some pre-snap reads, to be able to go through and audible and set his offense compared to what the defensive look was giving him. And it was impressive type of stuff for a relatively inexperienced quarterback. And I really love his ability to stand tall in the pocket. He had really, really good pocket presence based off of what I saw. He's comfortable staying in the pocket. He will hang tough. He's willing to take some big hits to make the big play happen down the field. Is he's doing that, he keeps his eyes down the field, whereas with Kyler Murray, I saw a little bit once the pressure came at him, that concerns me that he has a tendency to drop his eye level and he looks down instead of keeping his eyes up. Dwayne Haskins is able to keep his head up. He's able to keep his eyes looking down the field. He also showed me a pretty good feel for knowing the timing of when to move up, back, side to side, and around within the pocket. I really, really enjoyed it. And just in general, when I saw Dwayne Haskins on film, I saw a guy that had a bit of a command presence to him. And when you talk about the starting quarterback position, and you talk about some of the things that you really want to see from a physical trait standpoint, from a pure skill standpoint, there are things that are important. There's no question. But there is something to having that dude factor, something to being the guy that could come in and take command and take control. You know, as much as you talk about in last year's draft with Baker Mayfield, the one thing that you could not deny with Baker was that this was a guy that could come in and he could really take charge and take command of the situation, of the huddle, of the offense, and of the entire field. And while I don't think Dwayne Haskins has Baker Mayfield level attitude, confidence, arrogance, swag, he has enough of it that I think an NFL team will gravitate to him. And then you just look at him and you say, a big dude with a big strong arm. Accuracy is solid. Not spectacular. I think his accuracy was a little bit skewed in the system. I think he completed like 70% of his passes at Ohio State, but it was a little bit skewed based off of the system they played in, mind you. But when you talk about the ability to see the entire field for such an inexperienced quarterback, the ability to be able to take command of the huddle, to be able to take command of the field, be able to stand tall in the pocket, that's something that I really, really like. Now, when you talk about some of the flaws and concerns about him, you can bring up the fact that he comes from a place in Ohio State under a head coach like Urban Meyer, not known for cranking out NFL prospects at the position, and that's a fair, legitimate concern. How much of what Dwayne Haskins did was a product of all the speed and talent around him that he had on offense? He had guys that got drafted themselves like Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin and then Mike Weber. You had lots of talent there at the skill position on the offensive side of the ball. So how much was his 1 year of production a result of that? It's a fair question. Then people are going to point to the lack of mobility and the lack of ability to pick up yards with his feet on a consistent basis. He's not much of a threat moving around out of the pocket as a scrambler. He's not much of a threat just as a runner. And that is largely true. I think it is one of those things. He could do it a little more than he maybe showed in Ohio State, but it could work to his advantage in the NFL is that at times he could really surprise teams because he will be able to pick up some surprise yards because they're not going to bother putting a spine on him. Because ultimately, with Dwayne Haskins, his feet are not what's going to make him as an NFL quarterback in the specific way when you talk about scrambling and as a runner. Now, when we talk about the feet and we talk about what could impact him the most or what could hold him back the most, the biggest primary concern I have about Dwayne Haskins and his transition to the NFL is his bad footwork. His feet are heavy, they are slow, they are choppy. At times he looks like he is absolutely stuck in mud. More often than not, he doesn't utilize his lower body in his throwing motion at all. And sometimes that can be beneficial. You see it with like Matthew Stafford and some other guys, because he can throw at a variety of arm angles at a variety of different times. It can be a little bit harder as a defense to be able to time up when he's actually going to throw the ball. But it can also sap some velocity off of the ball. It can most certainly impact his accuracy. And when you look at his accuracy at times, while you said he generally had good accuracy in terms of getting to an overall target area, his ball placement could definitely be a little less than ideal, especially when he didn't move his feet and he didn't utilize his feet in his throwing motion. It's a bad habit of being off balance, bad habit of hanging back on his back foot. Not to mention, you even talk about the throwing motion, tends to get a little elongated. Like he can get really wound up, so to speak, when it comes to trying to put some extra zip on the ball, which can slow his release and could really cause some troubles when you're trying to throw into tight throwing windows in the NFL. But when I come back to the mechanics in particular, I talk about his feet and his footwork. That is something that is going to have to get better quickly, sooner rather than later, with the Washington Redskins if he's going to stick. If his feet get a little better, I'm not expecting him to be Barishnikov in the damn pocket or anything like that. But if he can get a little bit better with his feet, a little bit lighter on his feet, a little bit shiftier with his feet, a little more efficient and clean and concise with his footwork, he has incredibly high upside. We could be talking about a high-level starting quarterback in the league for years to come. And when I look at Dwayne Haskins and projecting him to the NFL level, one thing that concerns me is he's going into a situation in Washington where he won't be the starter most likely right away. That's going to be Case Keenum. And then that means that once you get into the season, you're not going to be taking a whole lot of reps in practice. And then you could potentially, if the Redskins get out of the mix at some point in time in the year, you could be throwing him into an adverse, tough type of situation, playing under a potential lame duck head coach. So are you bringing in a quarterback that's going to be in one system for 1 year, and then unless you promote somebody from within like a Kevin O'Connell, you're going to have to go out there and find somebody else that's going to bring in a new system, and Dwayne Haskins in some ways is going to feel like a rookie all over again. Then when you look at the lack of real top talent at the skill position, especially outside at wide receiver, not an ideal position to put Haskins in, a young quarterback like him, especially for a team in the Redskins that's had the amount of injuries they've had in the offensive line, the uncertainty of what's going on with the Trent Williams situation. It is less than ideal. But I feel like he has the talent, the work ethic, and the ability to overcome all of that. Where you could see a Kyler Murray, and you see a guy that can do these big, spectacular, splashy-looking things. I go back to the Alabama game, and I say in that college football playoff, in the first half, he was doo-doo. In the first half, he looked overwhelmed. In the first half, he looked like a 4'10" quarterback. He did. Second half, just because he had a couple of big plays and their offense finally started to move the ball, doesn't change the fact that in the first half, he was doo-doo. And even on those games that Haskins was off, even in those games where he didn't play as well, you could see with him that he was able to overcome it. He would get over his mistakes. He would find a way to respond. And you saw that throughout the season as Ohio State was pushed in some games. I can think of the Maryland game being one and a couple of others where the team was kind of playing behind the eight ball from the very beginning. He would bring his team back. There's just something about it. If I had to bet money on any of the big-name quarterbacks in the 2019 draft, making it sticking and potentially becoming a top 10 quarterback in the league for years to come, my money's going to be on Dwayne Haskins. I know the easy, kind of lazy comparison for him is going to be a Jameis Winston, and I will grant you there are some similarities that go beyond just the skin color. But that said, his arm is stronger than Jameis Winston. His ability to see the field better than Jameis Winston. I think his mechanics are not much different than Jameis Winston's coming out of school. But where you talk about Winston had the pocket presence and he had that swag, Haskins has that as well. And I think he had a better ability to see the field. He's a better decision maker. Doesn't come with the off the field drama and has a stronger arm. So I look at him, and there were times where I saw elements of Phillip Rivers on film. There were times where I saw elements of Big Ben Roethlisberger on film, which was another popular comparison, and I can totally see that. Anytime you compare a young quarterback to a future Hall of Fame quarterback, you're going to get those looks like, But bear in mind, in part, I'm going back to when Big Ben played at Miami, Ohio, and I'm thinking about him as a prospect. And when I'm evaluating Dwayne Haskins as a prospect, he reminds me of Big Ben as a prospect. And I can see similar level of upside in similar types of abilities. That doesn't mean in any stretch of the imagination Dwayne Haskins gets there. But if I'm a Redskins fan, the fact that I got him with the 15th overall pick, I feel pretty good about it. And I feel like I got a steal, and I feel like I may have gotten the long-term solution at the quarterback position that RG Nee was supposed to be but never was.